Hades is Supergiant Games' first foray into the action roguelike genre, and the first big name title on the Epic Games Store that isn't called Fortnite. And thanks to a press key from Supergiant, we're going to be checking out this lovely game and store for the first time together. Keep in mind, with this being in early access, what you see may not represent the current version of the game. And while there may still be some balancing and some general pacing issues, Hades does have potential to be one of the next great action roguelikes. So, as with their previous games, Hades is another really great attempt at merging a beautiful aesthetic, as you can see, with their own unique spin on gameplay, the aforementioned action roguelike. We play as the son of Hades, yes, that famous Greek god, who is trying to escape the underworld. Unfortunately for him, his dad is not so inclined to let him go, and standing in our way is the ever-changing structure of Tartarus. Fortunately, we've been trained by Achilles, and the game itself is built on essentially three forms of progression or gameplay systems. So let's start with combat, as you've been seeing that for the last few minutes. In Hades, you always will have three attacks. You have a generic one that's tied to X, and that's dependent on your weapon of choice. That also determines a special attack tied to Y. And you always have these kinds of magical shots, and they are tied to the B button. That's why I just launched right there. While they are incredibly powerful, you must pick up those shards that you see on the ground in order to regain that charge. Besides that, you have a dodge. And the dodge in this game is very important. Because you stop moving after the dodge is over, you have to be really careful with that timing, or you can be left motionless while an enemy is going to be all too happy to slam, shoot, or stab you. Now, with that said, the environment or the level design of Hades is procedurally generated, much like of the Binding of Isaac. Every room in this game, from what I've seen, is hard-coded, down to what obstacles, traps, and the general layout. What you don't know is what enemies are going to appear, as well as the reward. Now, as you get further into a level, or into each area, the number of enemies and their waves will grow. Now, on the doors, if you look on those doors on the left and right, those orbs, each orb will correspond to a different reward, be it currency or the game's progression systems that we'll talk about next. So you have to decide what you want to get out of surviving the next room, and that will kind of be your main choice. Do I want to get more gold to pay to Charon to buy some consumables? Do I want to risk it for more health? Your choice. Now, the rooms themselves don't really lend themselves all that much to changing how the events play out. You do get situations like this, where you must survive an endless horde, or specific bonus rooms, but they are more rare than what you see. With that said, let's talk a little bit more about the progression of the game. So the first thing, then this occurs locked to each run, is you find these boons from the various Greek gods. Each god has their own personality, and again, very distinctive aesthetic there. And the gods themselves, when you find their boon, will reward you with a choice. And the choice itself will determine, or will affect, one of your core abilities. Not only that, but the boons that you receive are also tied to different rarities. The higher the rarity may impact things further. And these are ways of changing what your specific powers will do. Now, with that said, you can't combine or split god boons to the same power. Meaning, if I change my normal attack to Zeus here, I can't then attach Aphrodite's or Athena's boon to that same attack. You can also find upgrades to that boon by finding additional versions of it as you play. Now, the boons themselves, as you can see, do radically change how things work. Zeus over here gives us this kind of chain lightning that passes between enemies. I could have also placed this on my shot as well to change that. And when you start messing with the other persistent model that we'll talk about next, you start to see how things can get very crazy in terms of building up your power, which you will most definitely need, as you are going to die a lot. And when that happens, you will return to the House of Hades here, where Hades will get to chastise you on your continued attempts at escaping. But more importantly, this is where you're going to get access to the major persistence system of the game. As you explore the realm of Tartarus here, you're going to find several items that will allow you to get permanent progress. The first are skeleton keys, which as you unlock enough of them, you will be able to get more, you'll get access to the game's various weapons. Each weapon has a different main, special, and kind of like a hold button command. My favorite right now is the shield, which gives you the Captain America throw, a block, and kind of a shoulder charge attack. The other thing you're going to find is this shadow currency. And that is the number that you saw in the bottom right hand corner of the screen right there. This currency can only be found by completing maps and buying it at Charon's store. And this is used here in our bedroom at this magic mirror to permanently upgrade our attributes. And this is very important because this is the only direct way of improving your character that's going to stay. Some of the biggies include giving you more dashes, your backstabs doing more damage, and obviously getting more health back. But without these upgrades, I can't see someone beating Hades, at least in this current form, without getting this persistent system. And that is a difference from a game like Spelunky or the Binding of Isaac, where the persistence is more about you learning the rules and not so much about requirement of to get through things. With that said, though, there is certainly a lot to like about Hades right now. Again, the aesthetic is just gorgeous, the writing is amazing, and there's a lot more to find, such as these boons that provide additional bonuses. And I'm sure they must have something like Bastion and Transistors mode where you make things harder for a great reward. I can't imagine them not putting that in. But, like I said, I do have a few concerns about the general pacing and structure of the game that we'll talk about next. But first, a quick shout out to our Patreon supporters. And now a quick shout out to the supporters over on patreon.com/gwbeiser. As we've talked about, there is a lot to like with Hades as it stands right now. The aesthetics are great, the voice acting is wonderful, and the basic combat and progression models do work. But my issues that kind of keep it from, taking on the greats like the Binding of Isaac and Dead Cells is that the general balance in terms of the persistence systems and what they're asking you to do is not quite there yet. As I said earlier, I found the dodge roll to be a little bit weird. It's such a short range, and the fact that you stop after you do it means that it's very easy to get hit by enemies. The enemies themselves will track you at the start of their attack, but once the attack has been launched or confirmed, they will not follow you otherwise. Which is why I kind of found it easier just to run around an enemy rather than dodge roll through them. Now, one of the more controversial or polarizing elements in Hades is the concept of armor and breaking. You're going to notice here that these enemies in this room have yellow health bars that then turn into red. When an enemy has red health, it means that any and all attacks to them will interrupt attacks. When their health bar is yellow, however, it means that you will not. This allows enemies to continue to attack you while you're hitting them the best you can. Now, when it's only one enemy, it's not that big of a deal. You can dodge through them or run around them. But when you fight entire rooms of enemies, it kind of devolves combat into a game of, tag. As you just try to get a quick pick in or a quick peck, run away. Quick peck, run away. This is why I like the shield. Besides having the ability to block, I can just smack the enemies from afar, Captain America style. But it does kind of, I think, mess with the general combat or the general gameplay loop of combat of having to go around picking and choosing or pecking these guys, and there's no real other way to get around it unless you have enough attack strength to break through things fast. And that's why I said earlier that the persistence system is required. Getting those backstab bonus damage is going to be very important, as well as I believe there may be a perk for critical hit or critical chance as well.
Something I can use.
But with that said, my final complaint has to do with kind of the boss battles right now. We're going to switch to some of that footage here in a second. I guess minor spoiler warning, but again, considering this game is in early access, there is a possibility that this fight may be different compared to what you're watching right now. Unlike the Binding of Isaac that has a ton of bosses that are all picked from their pool to face the player, Hades is going for more or less the same style as Dead Cells, where you have fixed boss encounters that you will have to deal with. So, my issue with the bosses right now is that it definitely is built or skewed towards high-end progression on the persistence system. If you do not get enough godly boons to increase your damage, these bosses, or at least this boss right now, is just super damage spongy. And I spent a better part of 5 to 6 minutes, maybe even more than that, wailing on her, and she just was not going down. And this was more or less after I figured out all of her patterns. And of course, as with bosses of this kind, she will spawn in an endless supply of minions for you to deal with, which again, if you have a high enough damage, you can just wreck them immediately. If you don't, you're going to be in for some trouble. And this is why I say the persistence system is required, because as we said earlier, getting stuff like the backstab bonus is going to be crucial to just being able to put out the damage output to wear her down. Now, I have not gotten to the second quote-unquote level of Hades yet. I have heard that the difficulty curve does get higher in terms of enemy stats, but I cannot confirm that at the time of this recording. So, with all that said, to begin to wrap things up, Hades definitely has potential, and I think this could, with the right balance and improvements, could be the best game from Supergiant since Bastion. And like we've said, with it being in early access, there is still plenty of time to add in more pacing and progression outside persistence systems, to change up the feel or the flow of the gameplay, and of course add in more variants, such as new enemy types, new rooms, new events, all that great stuff that has turned the Binding of Isaac into a never-ending game. So, with all that said, we're going to wrap things up here for this first look. We will most likely be playing Hades on stream in the near future, so keep an eye out for that. And once again, I would like to thank Supergiant for giving me a press key to check this one out, and to give me the, I guess, impetus to get on to the Epic Games Store. So, if you are a developer working on a game that you'd like me to take a look at, whether it's on Steam, Epic, or anywhere else, please don't hesitate to get in touch. Check back for daily discussions on game design here, and on Game Wisdom, where we examine the art and science of games. Until next time, this has once again been Hades, and I will see you all for our next video. If you're looking for another book about game design, be sure to check out my first title, 20 Essential Games to Study, out now. Thanks for watching the video. If you enjoyed things, be sure to do all the liking and subscribing that the kids are doing these days. Check out our Discord channel linked down below, where we hang out and chat game design, and come back later tonight for our regular streamings. But that's it, and tune in for more great content here and on Game Wisdom, where we examine the art and science of games.